Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, DwyerVIP.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Just a little commentary up front. The other day I was doing some research. I thought I'd watch one of my old videos, and I noticed that YouTube had placed an ad for hair products to help bald men in the beginning of my video. Come on, YouTube. Why'd you do that to a brother? All I could say is some bald men like being bald, right? Look at this light shining off my bald head right now. Anyway, look, let's talk about this Keith Thurman Jan Zaveck fight. I believe it's an opportunity. Now, people know that I don't have too much sympathy for casinos. I think casinos take us for suckers. When you walk into a casino and you look around and you see a lot of gold architecture and stained windows, and they're bringing you allegedly free cocktails, you need to realize that you're paying for all of that. Or at least gamblers are as a group. The casino is raking it in. Well, let's accept the challenge. Let's take the casinos when we can. Keith Thurman tonight against Jan Zaveck is a 10-to-1 favorite, a minus 1,000. He's a knockout puncher with a 90% KO ratio, right? The last time Keith Thurman had to go 8 rounds in a fight was 2009, right? 2010, 2011, 2012, all of his fights were shorter than 8 rounds. This is one of the hardest punchers in all of boxing. So here's the question. If Keith Thurman fights usually don't go 8 rounds, if he's that hard a puncher and he's fighting a guy who was trading blows and was rough and tumble, not backing down in the slightest when he fought Andre Berto, and that's Jan Zaveck, given that he's fighting a warrior and his fights haven't gone 8 rounds for years, why would I ever bet on Keith Thurman at minus 1,000? In other words, 10-to-1 odds, when I can get significantly better odds, 5 times better odds, by simply taking the minus 190 on the under 9.5 rounds, if I believe Keith Thurman is going to win this fight by knockout, as he usually does, right? If I have that belief, then I've got to believe that he's going to get the knockout before the midway point of the 10th round, and I'd much rather get minus 190 odds than minus 1,000 odds. Conversely, let me say this. When I see an unbeaten fighter with a 90% knockout ratio, and he's stepping up in class, right? He's fighting a former champion, right? He's in the deep end of the pool right now. In my opinion, that fighter is at risk of being exposed, right? These are always the key moments in a fighter's career. What happens if Keith Thurman throws the kitchen sink at Jan Zaveck and Zaveck's still standing there, right? Sometimes these unbeatable fighters with the huge knockout ratios, once they get tired and once that kitchen sink hasn't hit the target, they have a tendency to fall down. Think about George Foreman against Ali. By the way, Foreman was unbeaten at the time of the Rumble in the Jungle, right? Think about that fight. These world beaters Once they get in the deep end of the water, and it's late in a fight, particularly a guy like Thurman who, has never gone 12 rounds in a fight. Never. By the way, keep track of the distance here. This is a WBO welterweight elimination match. It's not a 10-rounder. Folks, it's a 12-rounder. You have a knockout puncher in this fight with no experience going 12 rounds. In my opinion, there is a distinct possibility that Keith Thurman, the favorite, gets stopped in this fight. Right? I believe you have a hedge here that's too good to pass up, in my opinion. I like the under, 9.5 rounds at -190. In other words, Keith Thurman, if he wins as expected, if he wins by KO as he almost always does, guess what? You're in the winner's line with everyone else as long as it happens before the midway point of the 10th round, right? That's full 9 plus half a round, right? I like that. Hedged against Zaveck at a plus 525, right? That's 5-to-1 odds, right? As an underdog. Understand, if Zaveck gets the KO inside of 9.5 rounds, you are truly in the penthouse. If Keith Thurman throws his best shot and finds out that those hooks aren't landing, and that's the other problem. Understand, Thurman doesn't throw straight punches, right? Veterans, if they know you're a mid-range hooker, can set up that defense so they're blocking your mid-range shots, or they're too far away keeping you behind a jab. They're too far away for you to land mid-range hooks, right? If Zaveck shows up with defense and actually is able to defend Keith Thurman, whose nickname is One Time, not 12 rounds, right? And if One Time finds that One Time isn't enough, nor 2, nor 3, because he's fighting a former champion, and if he finds himself winded and exposed, as explosive a puncher as he is, all I can say is we've seen this script before. Forget George Foreman. Let me name another big-time puncher in the heavyweight division who got exposed late. Think the later rounds of the first Tyson Holyfield fight. Right there again. Explosive puncher, one-punch knockout power, both hands. If anyone was a one-time guy, it was Mike Tyson, right? Mike Tyson got in the deep end of the pool through the kitchen sink at a seasoned vet. That vet was able to defend the kitchen sink. You know what happened. I'm not even talking about the Buster Douglas fight. I'm talking about the Evander Holyfield fight where Tyson threw the kitchen sink. The drain was clogged. He ended up getting stopped. I think Keith Thurman is going to have some problems against Zaveck if he's unable to get an early KO. I have seen Thurman on his back foot. He does have a back foot game. The question is whether or not that back foot game is good enough to deal with a former world champion. Right? This is boxing. I've been saying for a long time, be careful with these older fighters. If you look on an older fighter's resume and you see things like champion, right? 12-round grueling fights against people like Rafael Jakowicz, people like that. If you recognize the opponents that your opponent has faced and you say, wow, that's a tough son of a gun, and then you see a W next to your opponent's name, and when you see that your opponent has been in the ring with other explosive punchers like Andre Berto, and when you look at the film of that fight and you see your opponent's actually in there throwing punches, he's not covering up, he's actually trading punches, then if you don't get your opponent out of there early, right, if that one time doesn't happen in the first 4 rounds, As I like to say, you're in the deep end of the pool. So to sum up, I like the under, 9.5 at -190. Right? That gets you all the early knockouts. Hedged against Zaveck to win the fight. Why? Because these casinos are silly enough to be offering 5-to-1 odds on a world champion with a lot of heart. That's how I see the fight. My goal is simply to be in line collecting after the fight, right? If Thurman wins, great. All I ask is that he do so in the first 9.5 rounds. If Zaveck wins, great. I'll be soaking up 5-to-1 odds on half the play, covering the rest of the play in line as well. Let me know how you see it, especially if you have a strong preference on either fighter. Understand too, Thurman is a boxing prodigy. His trainer is Dan Birmingham, one of the best in the sport. He has been in the ring and has been around great fighters like Winky Wright. In other words, he has been around fighters who are very savvy, know all the tricks, can defend themselves, right, and are technicians, right? In Thurman fights, what I see is a guy with one-punch knockout power in both hands. He's a mid-range hooker. He was simply too much for Carlos Quintana, right? So understand, there is a lot of buzz about Keith Thurman in boxing. Many people believe he's too strong for much bigger names, right? I understand all the buzz. All I'm saying to you is he's in with a technician with a much longer resume and with experience going the distance. In my opinion, if Thurman doesn't get the early KO, he's going to be in trouble in the championship rounds. Let me hear from you. Thanks for watching.